So why do people cheat? Because there has to be a reason, right? And obviously it depends on your perspective. I mean, if you've ever been cheated on, you know it's because, well, they're a selfish a-hole. I mean, it seems pretty simple to me. Or if you've ever done the cheating, you might say you cheated because the person you were dating or married to wasn't really involved enough, were they? They weren't really paying enough attention to some area of the relationship, which led you to be drawn to another person. So who's right? Well, they're both right and wrong. Because it's not that simple, is it? Most people that cheat aren't just selfish a-holes. They didn't get married thinking they were going to cheat. Oftentimes, there are some subconscious patterns of behavior and unhealthy relationship practices in them or the relationship as a whole. There might have been red flags all along, but no one was paying attention to them. Now, that doesn't excuse what they did. There are no justifications for cheating. And cheaters like me need to know that cheating on someone is the very definition of a selfish a-hole thing to do. I mean, think about it. You could have broken up with them or divorced them and slept with whoever you wanted to. You might be a jerk for that, but you wouldn't be a cheater, and yet you chose to lie. You chose to go behind their back. You chose to betray them sexually. And then in most cases, you continue to sleep with them, exposing your spouse to potential diseases and STDs. Who would do that? There's no excuses for that. Only a selfish a-hole could do something like that. And you need to own that. And another thing we cheaters need to own is the excuses that we make. I mean, listen to what we tell ourselves. They weren't involved enough. They weren't paying enough attention to us. Do you hear the blame? I mean, it was really them all along. If they would have just done some things differently, we wouldn't have had to do that, would we? Do you hear the emotional immaturity and the arrogance? We hate taking responsibility for our actions because we know deep down what we did was cowardly and selfish and cruel and extremely hurtful. So our brain tries to protect us by making excuses or giving us an out. And if you were hoping this would be a video where I help you feel better about cheating on your spouse, this isn't that video. You shouldn't feel better, you should probably feel worse. But getting to that place, having that correct view of what you did and why, can absolutely drive you to something better and healthy in yourself and your relationships. But only if you take responsibility for what happened, only if you honestly answer the question, why, and then work towards self-reflection and emotional maturity in yourself and in your marriage. Anything else, and you're setting yourself up to make the same mistake again. So why do people cheat? Why did I cheat? I cheated because I wanted something and I wasn't getting it. It's that simple. If you've cheated, you wanted something and you weren't getting it, and you got to the point where you decided you didn't care who got hurt in this process. You were going to get what you wanted or what you thought you deserved, right? You cheated because you failed to realize that pornography is a pathway. They aren't just harmless pictures or videos. They have consequences in your marriage. They train your brain to not find your wife attractive anymore. They condition your brain to have a warped and false view of what sex and intimacy actually are. Even if you got that girl in the video, you wouldn't be happy with her because she's not real. She's pretending. You cheated because you didn't do everything to protect your marriage. You cheated because you thought it was just lunch, or you thought you were just friends with them. But it wasn't just lunch. It wasn't just a friendship or confiding in one another. It was a direction. It was a pathway, and it led somewhere, didn't it? You cheated because you took your eyes off your spouse and let them focus on something else. The Bible says, "Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned?" And the answer is no. Take it from someone who burned themselves in their marriage. Some of you are on pathways and directions that only lead towards divorce or affairs in your marriage. Isn't it funny how so many of us view God's commands as burdensome, right? We see God's commands for our lives as Him trying to keep us from something, trying to hold us back from something good. Except isn't it odd that my biggest regret and your biggest regret would have been prevented if we were following God's way of doing life and marriage and sexuality, wouldn't it? Is it possible that God's commands aren't meant to keep us from something good, but to give us something good, like a life filled with little regret and shame and guilt, and instead peace and joy and gratitude and contentment found in obedience to Him? If you value your marriage, then prove it by protecting it and prioritizing it. You cheated because you ignored your addictions. You cheated because you don't know what you don't know. But what you don't know can still hurt your spouse and potentially destroy your marriage, can't it? So learn what you felt like was missing in your marriage. Be honest with a counselor or a pastor or your spouse, because the moment you start to ignore that or let anyone come between you and your spouse, you aren't choosing growth and closeness in your marriage. You're choosing those with someone else. Marriages only thrive when two people seek to know and be fully known by their spouse. And you can't know someone else if you don't even know yourself. And keeping huge secrets from them even before an affair is not being fully known. And it's easy to say someone cheated because, well, they were tempted outside their marriage, but that's not the full story, is it? I'm sure other people had the opportunity to cheat, but they didn't. Why do you think that is? It's because when you have a healthy marriage with your spouse, when you are pursuing the love and the marriage that God intended you to have, filled with mutual selflessness and respect and honor and honesty and closeness, cheating doesn't have the same allure in those conditions, does it? And we have work individually that we need to do, and we have work collectively that we need to do to set us up for the best chance at success and mutually resisting different temptations in our marriage. And let's work towards creating a marriage where both people value it enough to not jeopardize it. And later in the video, it's going to seem like I'm blaming the other spouse or the relationship for any cheating that occurs, so let's just clear that up right now. Cheaters, you aren't the victim in any capacity. If you want something in your marriage, but you aren't getting it, whether it be closeness or intimacy or connection or sex, are you at any point justified in getting those from someone else other than your spouse? No. Yeah, but what if your spouse isn't giving them to you? Still no. Yeah, but closeness and sex are good things, and your spouse isn't giving those to you, so aren't they partially responsible for you going somewhere else to get them? No. Never. Ever. I'll give you an example. If you called me the most vile curse words out there, if you put together the most beautiful string of disgusting, offensive, grotesque, mildly accurate curse words, and I got so angry that I punched you in the nose, breaking your fragile nose with my super strong fist because I work out, who would get in trouble when the cops came? Me. But what if I explained to them, no, they said a bunch of mean words to me. Would they let me go then? No. I'm still 100% responsible for my actions. And that's not a perfect analogy, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. Bad spouses don't cause affairs. Bad marriages don't cause affairs. Your spouse may have contributed to your unhealthy marriage, but you are 100% responsible for your affair or cheating. That was your decision. You weren't forced to do that. You had a ton of other avenues or options you could have pursued besides sleeping with someone else. But you didn't. So why did you cheat? Because you felt like you needed something that you weren't getting. Doesn't matter if that need was healthy or legitimate or unhealthy. You needed something. And you are getting it, were you? And men have a dangerous tendency to think that they don't need anything in their relationships, and yet when they cheat, they risk everything. They risk their entire marriage. They risk not seeing their kids every day and tucking them in every night. They risk financial hardship for a fling, for a weekend with someone else. You're going to tell me that you aren't trying to fulfill a need in you for something, because most men who commit affairs say that they didn't actually want their marriages to end. What? What did you think would happen? But that's the thing, they weren't thinking. They didn't weigh the pros and cons, they were simply drawn in a direction, and they went that way because their needs that they didn't know existed were being fulfilled in someone else. And please don't hear me say that that justifies you somehow. That doesn't absolve you of the consequences of your decision. But you need to realize that you need things in your relationship like appreciation and respect and sex in your relationships to feel loved and valued. And you do a disservice to your spouse and your marriage by denying them or ignoring that you even have them. Because we think men cheat because of sex. But it's not sex that they were most attracted to. They were attracted to feeling desired again. They were drawn to feeling respected and valued again. And of course that doesn't mean if their spouse wasn't doing those things that they're somehow justified. Of course not. But this isn't about blame. This is about self-awareness and emotional maturity. This is about setting ourselves up in the future to have success in our marriage. John Gottman is a leading marriage psychologist. Everyone that does marriage counseling has read or studied some of John Gottman's work, and this is what he says about affairs. It is important to remember that most affairs are not about sex. They are about coping with a lonely marriage by finding someone interested in you. The devastation of sexual disloyalty is not the only breach of trust that can ruin a marriage Other forms of betrayal can be just as damaging as an affair, but too often go unrecognized or minimized, including by the victim. Then he lists other forms of betrayal: putting work ahead of your relationship, breaking your promise to start a family, coldness, selfishness, unfairness, lying, disrespect, emotional avoidance, withdrawal of sexual interest. That these are all examples of betrayal, and quote, can lead to consequences as equally devastating as adultery. Now, does that mean if you were guilty of some of these in your marriage that you deserve to be cheated on? Never. Or that you betrayed them too, so everyone's kind of even, right? No, I'm not comparing betrayals or judging which one is worse. Regardless of what anyone says, a sexual betrayal is devastating and far worse than the other things I listed. I'm simply saying that betrayal of any kind wrecks marriages. And you might have a marriage where no one has ever cheated, but that doesn't mean it's not suffering from other betrayals which are causing harm and setting it up to fail long term. Affairs are a symptom of something deeper going on within the person or within an unhealthy marriage. That doesn't mean the marriage caused the affair, but affairs are a symptom that there's something unhealthy somewhere. Then absolutely, maybe you're the healthy one and your partner is unhealthy, but that can still make a marriage unhealthy as well, can't it? You ever put mud in clean drinking water? It's no longer drinkable, is it? Your marriage is the same way. It takes two of you to thrive. You both affect the marriage as a whole. That's why you both need to be working towards health and depth and maturity and connection and closeness and friendship together. You both need to invite and encourage honesty and transparency in your marriage. Do you know what prevents affairs? Honesty about what's actually going on. Transparency about how both of you feel about the marriage. Marriages thrive when both people seek to fully know each other and be fully known by each other. And of course, it's embarrassing to be honest. It's oftentimes painful to tell your spouse the truth, that you're having thoughts of divorce or that you're feeling pulled toward another person. But guess what? It would save your marriage if you did it, wouldn't it? Because it would motivate both of you to get the help that you need in your marriage instead of keeping secrets and saying, I can handle the consequences, or what she doesn't know won't hurt her. Because ask my wife, it hurts. The best protection from affairs or divorce is a strong bond between both of you that's built on intimacy and vulnerability and trust. And it only takes one of you to avoid or ignore those, and it affects the whole marriage, doesn't it? And some of you are set up to fail and you don't even know it. Ignorance and emotional laziness kill more marriages than anything else. And your goal should be getting healthy for yourself, so that you can more clearly and calmly see destructive behaviors that might be hurting your marriage in yourself or in your spouse. Because the goal isn't to never talk to someone of the opposite sex again. The goal isn't only to decrease our temptations, even though that is a goal. The goal is to make our marriage tempting again. And we do that by doing the hard work of healing the pain and the massive break of trust if there's been a sexual betrayal. Or if you haven't had an affair, then you have an amazing opportunity to prioritize your marriage and grow it and strengthen it now while things are going well. Because doing so could prevent you from suffering the same problems that so many marriages do later on. Remember, there are certain conditions of soil that set plants up to grow healthy and strong, and there are other conditions of soils that only set plants up to wither and die, because no plant can survive without nutrients and water and healthy soil. So which soil have you planted your marriage in? You would never expect a plant to grow and produce healthy fruit in unhealthy soil, and yet we expect our marriages to survive and thrive in toxic environments. And it doesn't matter who's practicing them. One person can absolutely make a soil unhealthy and not conducive for growth. Marriages simply don't survive in climates void of connection and closeness and compromise and consideration. Marriages simply don't thrive in environments where affection and appreciation and friendship and vulnerability and empathy are ignored or unprioritized. You might stay together in that dysfunctional marriage, but you don't have a relationship. There's no trust or mutual respect or emotional connection. There's no healthy communication or conflict resolution. And when those things go, the relationship dies whether you stay together or not. And most men refuse to even learn what intimacy and trust and vulnerability even are. Most men don't invite or encourage his wife's feelings or hurts into their space. And that means most men don't reap the rewards of a wife that feels emotionally safe with them. Gottman concludes by saying, some couples leave a marriage by divorcing, others do so by staying together but leading parallel lives. Whatever the route, there are 4 final stages that signal the death of a relationship. The couple sees their marriage problems as severe. Talking things over seems useless, so partners try to resolve problems on their own. The couple lead parallel lives. Loneliness sets in. When a couple gets to the last stage, one or both partners may have an affair, but this betrayal is usually a symptom of a dying marriage, not the cause. The end of the marriage could have been predicted long before either spouse strayed due to the presence of harsh startups, the four horsemen, the unwillingness to accept influence, flooding, pervasive negative thoughts about the marriage, emotional separation that one or both spouses feel, etc. In most cases, if these persist, divorce is only a matter of time. I mean, let's be honest with each other. How many of those characteristics represent your marriage? Leading separate lives? Talking seems useless because it just results in fights. Chronic loneliness? Do you feel emotionally connected? When do you feel like she doesn't desire you sexually anymore? Whatever the reason for any of those, they're pathways. They're a direction in your marriage away from each other. And you can stay in those destructive cycles. You can blame the other person instead of protecting your marriage. That's what I did. And that's the point. I know where busyness and emotional laziness and unintentional neglect and apathy lead in my marriage. Do you? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.